Hi, my name is Laurel, and I'm working with the Performing Arts Academy to bring you these videos about music theory. This is the first video for Level 2, and you can find the link to the other one in the description. In this video, we're going to cover the circle of fifths and the step pattern of a major scale. So let's look at the circle of fifths first. The circle of fifths is a diagram that we musicians like to use to help us see the relationships between different keys. Here's what it looks like. You may remember that sharps and flats in our key signatures are always added in the same order. Looking at the circle of fifths will help us start to see why that's the case. On the right side are all our sharp keys, arranged in order of increasing sharps. You'll notice that the keys listed here are each a fifth apart, and that's why it's called the circle of fifths. So, if we start with C at the top and move clockwise, we'll see that the next key in order, which is G, is a fifth up from C. The one after that, D, is a fifth up from G. A is a fifth up from D, E is a fifth up from A, and so on to the bottom of the circle. On the other side of the circle, we have our flat keys, in order of increasing flats. In the same way, if we start at the top and go counterclockwise, we'll see that these keys are each a fifth apart as well, but moving in the opposite direction. So F is a fifth below C, B flat is a fifth below F, and so on to the bottom of the diagram. Now, you'll also notice that the key signatures start to overlap at the bottom of the circle. That's because they are what we call enharmonic, meaning they're different ways of naming the same set of pitches. For example, if we want to name the black key right next to C, we could call it C sharp because it's a half step up from C. But we could also call it D flat since it's a half step down from D. So we would say that C sharp and D flat are enharmonic because they're different names for the same pitch. That's what's going on with the keys at the bottom of the circle of fifths. The key of D flat uses the same set of pitches as the key of C sharp, G flat uses the same pitches as F sharp, and B uses the same pitches as C flat. So with this in mind, we can see that we can go through all the keys in the circle of fifths, keeping in mind these relationships of fifths, and it will come full circle. So that's the circle of fifths. Now let's talk about the step pattern of a major scale. Remember the difference between a half step and a whole step? With a half step, the two notes are as close together as possible. There's nothing in between. A whole step is equal to two half steps, so with a whole step, there will be exactly one note in between. It turns out that what makes a major scale sound major to us is the pattern of half and whole steps in the scale. So let's see if we can figure out what that pattern is. It'll be helpful to think about the keys on our keyboard for this. Let's start with C major. When we go from C to D, what kind of step is that? Well, there's one note in between C and D, so it's a whole step. What about from D to E? Same thing, there's a note in between, so it's a whole step. What about from E to F? There isn't anything in between E and F. They're as close together as they can be, so that's going to be a half step. So what do we have so far? Whole step, half step. Let's keep going. From F to G is a whole step, and from G to A is a whole step. What about from A to B? Also a whole step. And our last step of the scale is from B back to C. What's this one? There's nothing in between, so it's a half step. So for the whole scale, that gives us whole, half, whole, half. As it turns out, this pattern is also why different keys have different numbers of sharps or flats. Say, for example, we wanted to start on D and form a major scale. We would have to maintain the same whole, half, whole, half pattern. So what's a whole step up from D? It would be E. Now we have another whole step. What's a whole step from E? Well, it can't be F because that would be a half step. So we have to go up another half step to F sharp. Now, our next step in the major scale pattern is a half step. So what's a half step up from F sharp? That would be G. So we have our whole, half. Now let's finish the scale. Next is a whole step from G, which would be A, and then another whole step from A, which would be B. Now we have a third whole step. What's a whole step from B? It can't be C because, again, that would be a half step. So we have to go up another half step to C sharp. And then we have one final half step up from C sharp, which would bring us back to D. So for our D major scale, we have D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and then D again. Our only two sharps were F sharp and C sharp, and if we look back at our circle of fifths, we can see that the key of D does in fact have F sharp and C sharp. If we did this with every key on this circle, we would find the same thing. The sharps and flats assigned to each key preserve this step pattern of the major scale. So once again, the circle of fifths is a diagram that helps us see different keys with their different key signatures and their relationships to each other. They're arranged in fifths around the circle. These key signatures relate to the step pattern of a major scale, which is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And that's all for now, so we'll see you next time.